class today because I have a student starting in about 20 minutes. But we're just going to look at the difference between two types of clause. One is called a main clause, and it's also known as independent, but I prefer main personally. And the other type is called dependent, and it's also known as subordinate. Now, I'm going to call them main and subordinate, okay? I won't call them dependent, independent, because I think they're so easy to mix up. Yeah, dependent, independent, it's very easy to mix up. So I'm going to call them main and subordinate. Now, a main clause is anything that you can put a full stop at the end of. If you can put a full stop at the end of a group of words, that's a main clause, yeah? If it makes sense, if it's complete enough to put a full stop at the end, that means it's a main clause. And if you can't put a full stop at the end of a string of words, we're going to call it a subordinate clause. And this is very important. Very few English children, in my opinion, learn this at school, which is why very few English people learn how to punctuate, and most use their instincts rather than some kind of procedure. And there is a very good procedure a lot of the time that editors are using. And so let's use the same procedure. Let's learn what the editors are doing. And perhaps let's teach the children to work in the same way, because then they will have rules for punctuation and not instincts, which, you know, I don't know if you have instincts from birth for punctuation. I'm not really convinced that you do. So if we look at question 30, let's see what we're talking about. Yeah, question 30, if we look at that part in red, a simple sentence is an independent clause, full stop. Okay, so that whole bit in red must be a main clause. It must be independent if you prefer, but I prefer main. It's a main clause because we can put a full stop at the end, yeah? So question 30 is definitely, the red part is definitely a main clause. It must be, because we can put a full stop on the end. Now have a look at question 29. As you have come late to class 3 times this week, comma, you are in detention after school on Friday. Now ask yourself, is the black part a main clause or a subordinate clause? Is it complete? Could I put a full stop at the end of it? Yeah. And then ask yourself, is the red part a main clause or a subordinate clause? Could you put a full stop at the end of that? So let's have a look at it. And I hope you can see that this part here, as you have come late to class 3 times this week, that would make no sense at all with a full stop at the end of it. Yeah, if we said, if you walked up to somebody and said, as you have come late to class 3 times this week, and then walked away, they think you're crazy because you're giving them incomplete information. And that's why, as you have come late to class 3 times this week, it must be the subordinate clause, the black part. Yeah, this is the subordinate clause, as you have come late to class 3 times this week. And we call it subordinate because it is incomplete. Okay, we can't put a full stop at the end of that. Now look at the red part and ask yourself, could you write, you are in detention after school on Friday, full stop? And I think you'll agree that that is correct. There's nothing wrong with that. Yeah, that's correct. You are in detention. Oh, I forgot to put capital letter there. Don't like to do that. Let's get the capital in there. You ought to be with a capital letter, so like that. That's a main clause, and it's a main clause because we can put a full stop at the end of it. Okay, so that's the difference. The black part is the subordinate clause, and the red part is the main clause. And by the way, another way you can understand it is you could walk up to somebody and say, you are in detention after school on Friday, and then walk away. And they won't think you're crazy. They will feel as though you have given them a complete thought, a complete idea. And that shows us that the red part is the main clause. Now, why the hell is this important? It's important because of punctuation. Yeah, I think most teachers, when they try to explain commas, I think that most people say we use them for pauses, we use them for breathing, yeah, as if we couldn't breathe, we couldn't possibly breathe without commas, yeah, so we use them for breathing, which I find particularly amusing. But of course, commas have good reasons for being there, and this comma is there because if we start with the subordinate clause, you have a comma before you hit the main clause, sorry. And that's a rule for commas. If you start with a subordinate clause, you'll need a comma and then the main clause. Okay, now there's one more thing I wanted to talk about here, which is you might notice that this part on its own in black, you have come late to class 3 times this week. That actually, without the as, that's actually a main clause. Yeah, it's only the as that makes it incomplete. You add the as. It's the same with something like this. I went home, main clause. As I went home, subordinate clause, incomplete thought. And that's why we call as a subordinating conjunction. And it's an excellent name because this is exactly what these guys do. They start incomplete thoughts. If you've got a complete thought, like I went home, and you put a subordinating conjunction at the start, it becomes incomplete. So as I went home is incomplete. While I went home, if I went home, when I went home, as, while, if, when, they're all subordinating conjunctions, and they're very useful words to memorize because these guys always start incomplete thoughts. And that means that when you start the sentence with a subordinating conjunction, you have subordinate clause and then a comma and then the main clause. And we'll see this many times. However, if we swap the clauses round, and we can always do that, if we say you are in detention after school on Friday, as you have come late to class 3 times this week, then the comma is unnecessary. Okay, if you start with a main clause, no comma. If you start with a subordinate clause, comma. So let's go a little bit further, up to 28. So the part in red has got a full stop on the end, which means 28 must be a main clause. You can put a full stop at the end. You could go up to somebody and said he did his homework and went to bed, and they would understand you completely. Yeah. Have a look now at 27. You've got the black part, you must wait here, and you've got the red part, until I get back. Now, which one of these is complete and which one of these is incomplete? I think you'll see that you must wait here, full stop is fine. It's a complete thought. And you could say it to somebody, you must wait here, and then you could walk away and they would understand you completely. However, the red part, you couldn't go up to somebody and say, until I get back, and then walk away. It's incomplete, which means that the red part is the subordinate clause and the black part is the main clause. Now, always you can swap clauses around. You don't have to have them in that order. You can even put clauses inside clauses, and we'll look at that in a second. But we could say, until I get back, comma, you must wait here. And the reason we need a comma is if we start with a subordinate clause, you're going to have a comma before you hit the main clause. But if you start with a main, and we're doing that in 27, we're starting with the main, then you don't need a comma. And I want to draw your attention to until I get back. Once again, I get back, or I got back, especially I got back, I think you'll hear that. I got back is a main clause. You can say I got back, full stop. But as soon as you add the until I get back, yeah, it becomes incomplete. And that's why until is another subordinating conjunction. And I'm telling you about these words just because very few people learn them at school. But actually, these are the most useful words for punctuation, and you get higher marks in your essays if you use subordinating conjunctions and subordinate clauses, and a wide range of subordinating conjunctions. And if you use a range of sentences where you're using subordinate clauses at the start, in the middle, at the end, then you get higher marks because your writing becomes more complex. So that's why we study subordinating conjunctions. It's one reason. It's for punctuation, and it's also for improving your writing. Okay, so let's come up to 26. Excuse me. I've got a cold, had a cold for the last few days, so excuse me. So 26, I don't know yet. Now, I hope you can feel that you can say to someone, I don't know yet, full stop. So that's the main. The black is the main. And whether I can come to your party is incomplete. You can't just go to someone you can't say to somebody whether I can come to your party. So the red part is the subordinate clause and the black part is the main clause. And again, if we swap them round, and you can say whether I can come to your party, I don't know yet. but you will need a comma. Whether I can come to your party, comma, I don't know yet. Okay, it's got to be like that. Okay, and so this is why it's useful to learn about main and subordinate clauses, for commas especially, but also for improving the range of sentences that you have, increasing the range, yeah, making sure that you have a wide variety of sentences. Okay, so one more thing, whether you can, I'm sure you can hear that I can come to your party is a main clause, yeah, but you add the whether, you add the subordinating conjunction, and it becomes incomplete. Yeah, whether I can come to your party is an incomplete thought. So whether is a subordinating conjunction. And I want you to learn at least 15 subordinating conjunctions, just because they're so useful for writing skills, for improving writing skills. So this is another sub-conjunction. I'll often just say sub-conjunction because I do like to keep things simple. Okay, we'll do one more. You are not going to pass the test unless you start working much harder. I hope you can hear that this is certainly, you can put a full stop after test. You are not going to pass the test, full stop. So the red part is the main clause. However, the black part, you couldn't go up to somebody and say, unless you start working much harder, it's incomplete, yeah? And again, if you just say you start working much harder, yeah, or you should start working much harder, that's complete. It's when we add the unless that it becomes incomplete. And so unless, like as, like until, like whether, it's a subordinating conjunction. And if we swap the clauses round and say, unless you start working much harder, comma, you are not going to pass the test. Yeah, so if we start with a subordinate clause, we use a comma. You can see it's a very useful rule for using commas. If you prefer, you can think of it as incomplete thought, comma, complete thought, because that works. I mean, that is what we're doing. And we'll do one more, just because I've got to go now because a student is coming, but have a look at number 24. And what you'll notice is, well, we could actually add a comma in this one, and it's a bit annoying. I wish they had written a comma in here, because when we look at this sentence, since I came to Germany is an incomplete thought. Yeah, since I came to Germany, you can't say since I came to Germany, full stop. But you can say I have not once played tennis, full stop. So it's the I have not once played tennis, that's the main clause, and it's the red part, which is the subordinate clause, which means that usually in books, you do see a comma after Germany. Yeah, like this. Since I came to Germany, comma, I have not once played tennis. So it's a bit annoying that this website didn't put that comma in there. Sometimes 5% of the time you do see the comma missing. But generally speaking, in academic writing especially, you ought to put this comma in there after the subordinate clause. And in most literature, it's there 95% of the time when they start with a subordinate clause. So this is quite useful grammar. And it helps you learn the subordinating conjunctions. Of course, since is another subordinating conjunction. If you say, I came to Germany, that's a complete thought. But when you add the since, it becomes incomplete. So since is another subordinating conjunction. So we're going to do a lot more work on conjunctions, especially subordinating conjunctions, because you get higher marks in your exams if you use them. And if you use a lot of other rhetorical devices, linguistic devices, writing tricks, being honest, relative clauses are another one. So we'll look at some of those in order to improve the marks that we're getting on our writing. Yeah, we just have to learn about different structures, grammatical structures, and make sure we include them. Okay, so thanks everybody for watching. I do appreciate all the support, and I hope to see everybody soon. Please go to my website if you want new lessons. That's where this one will be, with some practice probably. And please do buy my book, Grammar in Theory and in Practice. If you think that things like subordinate clauses and main clauses are important and children should learn about them, then please do buy this book. You don't often see these things explained in grammar books for English kids, I warn you. So please do get this one. It's certainly in this one, and it's all the way through. Okay, so thanks everybody. See you all soon.